today I read on the BBC website that police officers in England don't actually have any power to enforce the 2 metre distancing rule. And I just wanted to ask you a little bit about that, because I wasn't sure what the term no power meant, because I believe that you are able to tell people to leave or to go back to their homes if they are outside. Has that now changed since Sunday?
No, that's a really good question, because actually, partly, I think sometimes what the confusion is all the different messages that come across the different news platforms. So when people say social distancing in that context, they often just mean the 2 metre rule and not the other bits of it. In England, I can't give you a fine. That refers to the power bit. I can't give you a fine because you stood 1.5 metres away from your friend and not 2 metres. And actually, I think that's just okay. I don't think the police need sweeping powers to give people fines about everything, because actually there's a lot of things we don't necessarily have clear-cut powers about, but we can always go up and have a conversation with people. And so sometimes you might find that you sat too close to your mate in the park and a police officer happens to be passing and they engage in a conversation. It doesn't matter that they have the power to do so, because actually what they care about is the bigger picture. And it's just a friendly reminder. You know, it's the same for all of us. It is so unusual not to approach a friend and stand close in your personal space. I'm not a particularly kissy and huggy person, but I still stand pretty close to people. And I like to give my mum a hug. And all of a sudden, we can't do that. We've got to do this funny we do it in the office. We're kind of passing each other on the staircase and doing this funny little dance where we're kind of shuffling to keep the 2 metre distance. So to suddenly start imposing fines on people because they're not strictly adhering to 2 metres. I mean, I don't have a big long wooden ruler in my back pocket where I can measure it out. I think that's really proportionate, actually. We do still have powers to give fines, but it'll be more about, we can't have people turning up on the beach with a barbecue and 20 mates and some beers and all that stuff that's okay and normal most of the time. We can still enforce all that stuff. If you compared the number of people we speak to the number of fines we've given out, fines are just massively in the minority. So yeah, so to be really, really clear, there are still some occasions where we can still issue a fine. We can't issue a fine to an under 18, only to their parents. And it can't specifically be for people being closer than 2 metres to each other.
Brilliant, that explains quite a lot. And I also wanted to add on to that question, have the rules changed since the beginning of lockdown? Because before we were discouraged to kind of go and sit on the beach, even if we were by ourselves. A couple of my friends were asked to leave the beach, even though they were just sitting by themselves. So has that now changed? Is it acceptable now to go and sit on the beach after you've had your exercise, or is it still being kind of encouraged just to go straight home? I'm so confused, honestly. I don't even know where to begin with anything. I'm just, none of it makes sense to me.
No, and it's mind-boggling, isn't it? And actually what I think, and this isn't a criticism, what I think shows that confusion is that Boris Johnson made his announcement on Sunday. On Monday, on the morning news channels, you had various ministers answering questions, and some of them got those questions wrong. They got the answers to that stuff wrong. And rather than seeing that as a reason to point the finger, I see it as a reason to go, actually, it's confusing. And it will be confusing because lockdown came with like a big bang, but actually release of lockdown is kind of this gradual bit by bit thing. So if rather than pointing the finger and being accusatory, we could go, it's difficult, it's hard to understand, we're going to remember that in the way that we communicate with people, I think it'll go a lot further. Legislation, there is actually no new legislation gone through Parliament yet, but the government have been really, really clear that when you go out for your exercise, you can stop and you can have a picnic and you can sit on the beach and you can just be in the outdoors, however it is that you like to enjoy that, and it be fine and no police officer's going to come and move you along. The difficulty comes if your household group sits with another household group and then someone might come and have a conversation with you about it. But no, if the weather's nice, you're on your walk and you think that bench looks like a great place to sit for the next 45 minutes and stare at the horizon and feel a bit better about the world, take it, do it, it's fine.
This has come mainly from our Facebook group that we set up. A lot of parents and carers have been concerned about the number of young people using drugs at home during lockdown, so like mainly smoking weed. And I wanted to ask, is there a police strategy towards this and like policing young people taking drugs at home and smoking a lot of weed at home?
Yeah, so it's a really difficult one. Keith, was actually quite quick to anticipate this when lockdown started, and he felt like this would be a problem. So he keeps a relationship with one of our, we call them drugs experts, to try and understand what that looks like at home. But actually, we're not inside people's homes. So it's really hard to understand what that change in drug behaviour looks like. Actually, that is the first step, is literally trying to understand just that. What does that change in young people's drug taking behaviour look like right now? How has it changed? And what is the space for policing that? Because actually, young people who are choosing to smoke cannabis aren't in and of themselves the biggest problem in that whole chain. Actually, it's people that are making the money from that, and exposing young people to the risks that comes with it, or trying to influence their choices. And that's not necessarily much consolation for parents at the moment, that we don't have the answers. But if I was a parent of a teen, I'd be getting my teen to follow the police.uk.insta channel, because they do give some really trustworthy, but at the same time non-judgmental advice on drugs. That, I think, would be a good starting place if I was a parent trying to get my teen to think about making better choices.
It's a really good answer, really brilliant. And it just sounds like you're focusing maybe less on the teenagers who are smoking and more on the people that are selling and the kind of bigger picture of it, because there's not much you can do if a teenager is smoking at home in their own house. It's just kind of trying to stop the supply. Is that right? Did I get that right?
Yeah, because there are so many aspects to drug use. Kind of the use is kind of just at one end of the spectrum, and it kind of goes all the way back. Cannabis starts as a seed and is grown somewhere by someone who often will exploit someone else in the process of that growing. Just as an example, in the UK, it's pretty common for young people to be trafficked from places like Vietnam. And actually, I was listening to a podcast and it had a specific story from a very specific young man. I think he was from Vietnam, and essentially his parents had died in a fishing accident where he lived in a fishing village. So he got moved to the nearest city where his grandmother lived. His grandmother died, so that was him as an orphan. Without a social care system like we have in this country, he was literally an orphan on the street. So someone one day picked him up, took him to a warehouse, essentially has kidnapped him over the course of however many months, moved him to the UK, where he then had to grow cannabis for very little food and absolutely no money before he escaped. And actually, that's the bigger problem. And in some ways, I'd like young people that are making choices around cannabis to know about that stuff, that there is a wider impact, but they're not fully responsible for that wider impact. And we as the police, we often decide how to use our resources based on a model called threat, harm and risk. And actually, if you think about where's the biggest threat in that situation, where's the biggest harm, or where's the likelihood of those two things colliding, it's in that place where the cannabis is being grown by a young person who has not chosen to be there and has not chosen that lifestyle, versus the young person who kind of is choosing the lifestyle, it's one we'd rather they didn't.